Good evening, welcome. I'm John, I'm the event director at Literati Bookstore. We're pleased to welcome Sophie Mackintosh to launch her latest novel, Blue Ticket. Tonight she'll be in conversation with Maris Kreizman, host of the Maris Review and most recently Sheltering for LitHub. You might have heard me mention it as you joined, but our Zoom etiquette's very straightforward. You're muted, you'll stay muted. We just also ask that you keep your video off as well. If your video pops on, I can turn it off for you. Following the conversation, we'll have time for a Q&A. So the chat function is closed, but you can send messages to me at any time. So if you have questions you want to ask, whenever you feel compelled to ask them, you can send them directly to me. I'm the only one who will see them. And then after the conversation, I'll come back on to ask those questions. And a reminder that you can purchase Blue Ticket at the event page that brought you here, and also post a link in the chat. So if you live in the US, you can buy this book directly from the Literati Bookstore. And if you live in Ann Arbor in Southeast Michigan, you can also purchase select titles from our store through curbside pickup as well. In lieu of a book purchase, we also ask that you consider a $5 donation to sustain our virtual programming. So whether you'd like to think of that as a subscription for this week or this month or this year, we appreciate it. But otherwise, we simply thank you for attending and for joining us this evening, or morning, or afternoon, or midnight, where Sophie is. And so without further ado, Sophie Mackintosh is the author of The Water Cure, which was longlisted for the 2018 Man Booker Prize and won the 2019 Betty Trask Award. In 2016, she won the White Review Short Story Prize and the Verigo Stylist Short Story Competition. She has been published in the New York Times, Elle, and Granta magazine, among others. And Maris Kreizman is the host of the Maris Review, a literary podcast. She's a writer and critic whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, Vanity Fair, the New Republic, and more. Please join me in using your clap reaction function to welcome Maris Kreizman and Sophie Mackintosh.
Hey. Hello. Thank you, and congratulations, Sophie.
Thank you.
It's your book launch. You got a rave review in the New York Times today.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, good. So it's a bit surreal, but yeah, it was really nice to wake up to you.
That's great. Do you want to read first?
Yes. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's like waving at kind of a screen full of videos that I can't see. I'm going to read a bit from Blue Ticket. I'm just going to read a bit from the beginning, where a scene where the main character, Kala, is in the lottery station and she's about to pull the ticket, which is the blue ticket of the title. The lottery station was a lot like the clinic. 2 stories of pale brick, a flat roof. When we pulled up, the emissary outside was smoking a cigarette, but he threw it into the road when he saw us. "Congratulations," he said to me. He led us inside to where the others waited. The floorboards were wooden, varnished aggressively. Countless feet had scuffed that floor. It pulled the reflections of all the lights. Spotlights from the ceiling, a lamp on the desk where a man in a dark suit sat on an orange plastic chair, watching us, legs crossed. He could have been a doctor, but he wore no white coat, no white plastic gloves. There were 4 other girls in their own dresses sitting in a row on a wooden bench, flowers both real and fake pinned to chests. They were not the girls from my school. 1 wore velvet, 2 wore tulle, and the other wore satin like me. I took a shine to the girl in satin. Same species. We lined up, waiting to pull our tickets from the machine, the way you would take your number at the butcher's counter. The music popular that year played from speakers on the ceiling. Just gravity enough. Just ceremony enough. Not necessarily such an important thing, after all. My name was called first. They watched me as I walked the length of the room, towards the machine inside its cloaked box. I put my hand in it. I was apprehensive, but ready for my life to be decided. I closed my eyes and thought about my father with the wine bottle to his eye. The machine was silent as it discharged a sliver of hard paper into my hand. It was a deep cobalt. "Congratulations," the possible doctor in the dark suit said to me. The other girls followed, each taking their own ticket from the machine in turn. "Almost a full house," he exclaimed at the end, reading a piece of paper spat out from the machine. We huddled and compared tickets. They were all blue except for one, which was white. The girl with the white ticket was escorted into a separate room by the doctor and another emissary. We watched the three of them walk through an unlit doorway. When the doctor came back, he clapped his hands twice. "You have been spared," he said, with a terrible benevolence. At the desk, the emissary who had been on the door wrote down the results to communicate to homes, to clinics, to places distant and important that we did not know about. One by one, we were called into another room, a different room to the girl who had pulled the white ticket. I lay on a reclining bed with a crisp paper cover, and another doctor, this one a woman, and comforting, almost, in the familiar white coat, told me to fold up my knees. She pushed something inside me that hurt, a sharp and spidering pain. "What is it?" I asked, and she said, "Your doctor will explain it all when you get wherever you're going." She said when and not if, and I was grateful for that. Behind me, I left a large rose of blood on the paper. The bathroom of the lottery house was filled with yellow light, the veins of my thin neck standing out underneath it. I was a plucked chicken with badly applied eyeshadow, but the locket was around my throat now. There was a long, low mirror above the sink, a wicker chair in the corner, and 2 bathroom stools painted peach. In the mirror, I watched the other girls leaning against the wall, toes flexing, eyes raised to the ceiling, moving to the door when the girl with the white ticket came in to join us, then back to the ceiling. There was a dying flower arrangement at the corner of the sink, gaps of oasis showing through pink carnations. The music came through in here too, speakers in the ceiling or underneath the sink. At first, I kept looking at the girl who had drawn the white ticket, the other girl in satin, though hers was pale blue and dirty at the hem where it dragged. Her eyes were red. I had the urge to take her arm and run with her somewhere, out to the woodland, between lessons, but beyond the broken barbed wire of the school perimeter where the teachers could not see us. But I did not touch her. I made myself stop looking. Thank you.
Hooray! Actually, I will applaud for you when there is an absence of any other sound.
Yeah.
Sophie, tell us about what that blue ticket means as opposed to that white ticket.
Yeah, so the blue ticket on the day of the first period, the girls are sent to a lottery station where they pick a ticket. A white ticket means they can have children, a blue ticket means they can't, and then that ticket dictates the rest of their life, essentially. Kind of decisions they have to make and the life they're kind of allowed is seen through the prism of that ticket. It's not really something that can change. Yeah.
So it's a real we can't have it all kind of a book.
Yeah, literally not in this book.
I think even in the copy, the description copy for the book, you talk about the relief of having the decision taken away. And that is one way to describe it. There are others, though. I was hoping you could talk about what this very large premise means for the women of your unnamed country.
It is such a large premise. I think that's the kind of one of the challenges I had when writing it, where it's like, there's so many directions to go in this world, and this is such like a kind of, it's such a nuanced thing because it's a totally simplistic premise. Like I mean it's beyond simplistic. I really don't think that there are 2 kinds of women in the world and that you either could have a baby or you can't. For the purpose of the book, I had to keep it simple and kind of, I guess, like lean into the stereotypes or lean into lean in and kind of to a certain idea of womanhood as a kind of narrative device. So yeah, the blue tickets kind of have very free life, they can have career, they have a very active social life, whereas the white ticket women, I think, are kind of expected to behave with more I can't say the word, more decorum. They're kind of expected to raise children, have families, but then this kind of family life is off limit to the blue tickets. So there's obviously benefits to both sides, but then the case is for Calla, the main character. She wants the life that she has kind of not been given, and I think the issue is not that she wants it so much, but that she's kind of questioning, well, what's wrong with me? Why wasn't I not given that kind of life? Like, why is it like this? What has been seen in me?
Yeah, and it's so hard how do you not want the thing that you are told that you cannot have? That makes it even more mysterious and exciting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Keep going.
No, it's fine. Sorry. Still getting used to this.
I just feel like in my own life, I have made the decision not to have children, and I have friends who have children who constantly whisper to me and say I made the right choice. And it's impossible, especially right now during the pandemic, when women are, if they have jobs, they are working from home, and if they have children, they are parenting from home. And so there's really just no letting up.
Yeah, it's I've been I read like it's a terrible study about how male academics, the submission to the work has gone like skyrocketed, and female academics work has really gone down. So it's interesting because we have kind of these ideas, the ideas and the stereotypes in Blue Ticket are kind of, they seem regressive, but I think a lot of it is like really embedded still into our automatic assumptions of who does what and kind of what roles women play. So it was interesting to, in a way it was kind of playing with my own thoughts and anxieties around having a baby. And I am quite keen to have a baby. Like I know I definitely want to be a parent, so it was interesting, writing this book over a period of a couple of years, and kind of working out my feelings on it. And I was influenced a lot by Sheila Heti's Motherhood. Have you read it?
Yes.
I'm sure some of you here have read it too, but it's kind of like, it's quite an interesting take on motherhood, because it's her kind of working out if she wants to have a child, and she does it not so much in a fictionalized way, but it's almost like autofiction. And reading that kind of made me think, even if I'm not pregnant and don't have a child, I can kind of approach it from the slightly outside perspective of someone who's still working those things out. And it's kind of like, it's quite like I say a fertile space for exploration. It sounds a bit on the nose, but
I mean, why not? And of course, speaking of the roles we expect people to play, one of my favorite details in Blue Ticket is that the fathers, if they are seen walking a pram around, that they are celebrated. They basically get prizes for being dads and like doing dad duty. And so like Calla, when she is obsessed with babies, wants to congratulate these men who she sees, and so gives them little presents. And it's like, come on, you need presents?
Yeah, I guess the idea of, obviously, like, not all dads, but the idea of kind of rewarded for doing stuff that kind of women are taking for granted. I live in like Walthamstow in London, which is kind of very very hot dad central. You see a lot of that kind of stuff, but again, that was a kind of a fun, it's just fun to take things that you see in real life and just kind of make them kind of really absurd. Like I just love that I can do that. It's almost like an aesthetic choice more than a kind of narrative one, if that makes sense. It's like, why not?
Absolutely. But you do make it's so interesting in terms of your world building. You never sit us down and like tell us the information that we have to know about this world. You kind of let us piece it together. Fair?
Yeah, I like to, I think, not kind of spoon feed the reader too much. I'd rather like kind of drop little clues, and then because then kind of it's interesting for the reader to kind of reach their own conclusion, and to, you know, when I kind of looked back at the book, to me, I've got like a really specific idea of what the world is like and what it looks like. And I think there are those kind of cues, but I think there's ways you could interpret it differently too. And that's kind of interesting for me to leave that space for readers to kind of build, I guess, their own idea of it.
And that's fascinating. Like, I'm not asking for any examples, but like, how much of this world have you envisioned in some way that wasn't a part of what the final book became?
Maybe I'm not really sure. Maybe a few things. It's kind of hard for me to tell, because in my head I see it. I kind of see it, and then it's always a bit like, maybe part of the reason I'm ambiguous is like, why can't you see it too? Because it's in my brain, and I have a failure of imagination to put myself in a really yeah.
Fair. Tell me about writing the character though of Calla, because it feels like we have incomplete pictures of what the entire world looks like, but we have like a laser focus on her.
I think I'm always really interested, I guess, not so much in the kind of in the world, but in the main character, and it is so in her head, like it's so kind of claustrophobic at times. Calla was kind of with me really early on in the writing of the novel. I had a really firm idea of who she was and what she wanted and what she would kind of do. And I think she's quite like a frustrating character. I know that you know, sometimes her motivations can be difficult to understand. And again, that was, you know, part of the thing I wanted to explore is, why does this woman who's like totally not maternal and kind of a mess, like, why does she want to have a baby? And it's like, well, you know, sometimes you do.
Sometimes you just do.
So it's kind of, yeah, I wanted to explore that world through someone's head, and someone totally in her head, and it's quite like self-absorbed as well.
Yeah. And she, you know, because she was conditioned this way, she has that blue ticket party girl kind of lifestyle. And even her doctor, Dr. A, says that she doesn't seem very maternal, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's that idea of nurture versus nurture. It's kind of nature versus nurture. Are we intrinsically one thing? Are we intrinsically another? Like, we change as people so much, and I think it's perfectly logical that she could, you know, be really happy with her life and still want a child, and you can kind of hold those two things in you and have this kind of, yeah, the longing for everything to be the same but still want to have a child. I'm sure lots of parents can kind of identify with that too.
Yes. I love how in a dystopian novel, that's where you can find the doctor who does it all, who is the psychiatrist and tends to the body and the mind, and probably for very bad reasons, but it's pretty impressive. I was like a little jealous for a second of Calla's relationship with her doctor.
He's kind of like priest, therapist, actual doctor, like very, very, very good service. Like, if anything's wrong with you, immediately he's kind of like on it. I mean, obviously in a sinister way, but yeah, that's what I just love about kind of writing speculative things. I think is, you know, I wanted to have this figure, this kind of all-knowing figure, like it's kind of so all-knowing to the point where you're almost like, has she like invented him? Like, I think that was in an earlier draft, I was almost like, maybe he isn't real, and then I was like, no, he needs to be real. But to kind of have that kind of character who can serve that kind of role, and the doctors in the society, yeah, they have all these functions and they're quite sinister.
And certainly it gives us a clue as to what the rest of the world is like. If this doctor can be as close to all-knowing as possible, then what are the tools at his disposal?
Yeah, a lot of sort of tapes and no, it's not very like high-tech society. Again, something I could just do. But I think that kind of makes it creepier, because the idea of, you know, like tapes and people making notes and all this kind of old school tech instead of, I guess, the surveillance that we're used to now. It made me kind of think, when I was writing it, you know, there's ambiguity about when it's set, and I think when I was writing it, I had the idea of, maybe kind of not even futuristic, but something has changed in the world that we know, like, but like back a bit, like it's almost like a parallel universe that kind of forked off in a different way.
I mean, the map plays such a big important role, and certainly GPS would have
GPS would kind of
changed the entire situation.
The cell phones, like, hey, you're looking for Kala, she's like up the road.
And I don't know I don't know actually what the experience of the pandemic is like where you are, so we should talk about that. But I do have this feeling that more and more people, we're all a little bit survivalists now anyway, so we want to make sure we have like the basic tools that we need that have nothing to do with the internet and television.
It's weird to think about, because I mean, even at the beginning of this year, and I had no idea what was coming. I don't think anyone had any idea of what was coming. And I guess because you're in New York, right? Yeah. So you had that kind of like we did in London. I assume that kind of that time where the supermarkets were empty and everyone was, scuttling around with masks on, looking like absolutely terrified. I remember like going to the shops kind of early on, and I just felt like I was in a video game in a really kind of really horrible, surreal way, where I was like, okay, I've got to get to the shop and I've got to get my food, and I can't touch anyone, and like I can't let anyone come near me. And it was just, is this really this, like, my life was very different like a week ago. I don't know if that kind of will leave us that sense of like watchfulness, but I know like London kind of feels quite normal now, maybe like worryingly normal, but I haven't been out very much.
In New York, in my darkest times, I was worried that people would start to kill each other over toilet paper. How's that for dystopian? Real life. But so then it became sort of comforting to me to see, which is really, really messed up, what happens to Kala, and that she is given survival tools in two different times in her life that she must use to get by.
I think we do have like resilience, and obviously it's been scary, but I do kind of think maybe the best, hope like the best is kind of brought out in people as well. And everyone in Blue Ticket is just very good at surviving. But it's given me like a new perspective on speculative fiction, because I think I wouldn't have thought to write a world where you literally can't touch people, and thinking about the implications of what happens when you can't touch people, and it's kind of beyond what I would have imagined. So many logistics and so many like things that you miss that you take for granted.
Zoom book events.
Yeah. This is great. I've never done a book event in the States before, so this is very exciting.
Well, welcome-ish. Here's a question that isn't exactly about the book, but I don't know if you'll know. I just saw that the EU is not letting Americans in.
Oh, really? Is that new, or is that okay?
Yes. I want to say yes. And I don't know anymore, Sophie. Is the UK, does that count in the UK?
I don't know, because I feel like we're kind of aligned, right? The US and the UK, we're kind of basically dealing with it the same way. So it's actually kind of quite surreal, like I guess looking at the rest of the world and seeing everyone having a really different pandemic experience to what we're having, and seeing family in Australia who can kind of carry on as normal by this point, and friends going to restaurants and stuff. So we're united in having a weird coronavirus experience, two nations.
Yeah, too much in common with our two nations at this point. Tell me about, you mentioned Sheila Heti's Motherhood. What other kinds of books were you thinking about when you began to write Blue Ticket?
So I was reading like a lot of short stories, like weird short stories, things like Joy Williams, I was reading quite a lot of like pregnancy literature as well. I remember there was a book called Little Labours by Rivka Galkin.
Oh yeah.
I really love it, and it was very fragmented, and I guess she wrote it during new motherhood, like very new motherhood, and it was fragmented because she literally had like no time and concentration. And it was interesting to me to kind of think about a new kind of form coming out of pregnancy and motherhood. And I've kind of always been drawn to more poetic forms anyway. Like I'm like a huge Maggie Nelson fan. Like I love her. And yeah, so it was interesting to think about how I could, I guess, do something slightly different with the language than the water cure, something that would kind of, I guess, reflect Cala's fragmentation and how to sort of delineate the passing of time over a really specific amount of time, which is 9 months essentially in the book.
Yeah, and then the water cure took place over decades, right?
I think it was like kind of, yeah, it was like the thing, generally it was along, but like it was kind of one specific week. I like a compressed time frame or a specific time frame, I think, just to give me some structure, because even now I'm like, how to write book? Like, what happens?
And tell me about, so Blue Ticket is actually divided into locations. Tell me about that choice. I'm trying to find one. I'm looking at the galley. Cabin.
Yes. Yeah, because it is kind of a road trip. Well, kind of, it is a road trip. There are really specific locations on the journey, and so for me, it made sense to kind of group them into these locations, because each location has a different energy, and each is kind of a different stage in her pregnancy and a different stage in both her journey and her relationships either with others than herself. So it was one of those things that kind of, it almost like banded itself off and just felt really right. Like the feel of the first bit especially is quite different to the rest, because we're kind of scoping out her life in before she goes on the run, and getting to know the rules of this world a bit, as far as we ever get to know any of them. It was kind of nice to have that idea of like a physical progression in tandem with her pregnancy, it actually reflected in the writing.
And then the people she meets on her journey are so, each one is so memorable, because truly you don't prepare the reader for what they might get, right? So there's a feeling of anticipation every single time.
Yeah, it's like everyone she meets, I think that's what I was thinking about, was everyone she meets could be a threat or a friend. And I think when, in earlier drafts, I was like, oh, she's going to like meet other women on the road and whatever, they'll help each other. And it's like, actually, would they help each other? This is a really kind of cutthroat society, and they're all kind of on the run, and they're all competing with resources. Like maybe they would not help each other. So trying to find that balance between, are they friend or foe? Could they be both? Who has ulterior motives?
Right. And then I am going to cop to being a really self-centered American, because you don't specify a country in which Blue Ticket takes place. And I think because Margaret Atwood conditioned me to run up to Canada at the first sign of trouble, I started thinking about Blue Ticket in the same way. Did you have any specific locations in mind? Do you want it to be vague?
I want it to be vague, but I think, I guess I'm taking liberties, because in my brain I was like, okay, the terrain feels very sort of German or Swiss. Like there's lots of, I think I was imagining kind of hotels from my childhood, like service stations and stuff like that you would get in European countries, that kind of vibe with like sliced cheeses and buffets and stuff. And that kind of mountainous terrain. But then I was like, maybe it's kind of Scotland in the UK, but then the UK is kind of too small. So I think, yeah, I mean, probably the place where you would get all those terrains would be America. But it's just a mulch of places, really. And again, it's like, it's fine, I can make it up. I can make it up. It's a book.
There you go. You don't have to have a perfectly a world that looks exactly like ours. Tell me a little bit about, effectively, and this, I don't think this is a spoiler, Calla is banished for pursuing her pregnancy. And I think banishment is such an interesting thing to talk about now when we talk about cancel culture and the public shame that comes with messing up in some way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought of it in those terms before. I just think this idea of she's in this society and there's a very specific idea of what she's allowed, and to want outside of what is offered, it just seems like, it's like, why should she, like, why does she deserve that above anyone else? So then she is like, sent away, but she doesn't get another chance. It's just kind of, she has to go.
And it seems like, I don't know why they would be, but the people in her community, of course, seem so angry. I think,
the idea of, still tying into the idea of deserving, I guess. I get the idea of what's fair. Like, okay, maybe I wanted to have a family too, but I didn't get to do it. I didn't get to change my ticket. So like, why should you? It's kind of like, it's a bit like curtain twitchy. The idea of people kind of informing on each other's neighbors and stuff, because why should anyone have it if they can't have it either? And kind of, reliance on bringing each other down.
And of course, the white ticket women are not fully fulfilled either.
I mean, I think, I'm sure some of them are, and some of the blue tickets are as well. That's the thing. It's just, it's so big. It's so big as a concept. It's, it's kind of, in a way, it's like, I wish I could kind of go back and write like 10 different blue ticket novels and kind of explore different parts. Like, where are the blue ticket women who use their freedom to do amazing things and like solve climate change, and like in the book we kind of touch on white ticket women who are really unhappy with their lot and how they kind of get around having to have children and things. But there's so much to think about. It's, I don't know, I just really interested in like motherhood. I guess it's just being part of it for me is being in my early 30s, and there was a time I was writing stories and there would always be a pregnancy popping up or a child. So like, I don't know when it's going to stop. Maybe when I actually have a child. I'll be like, wow, this is not exciting to me anymore. I literally have one.
That's funny though. And it speaks to, I think, those of us who don't have children have a right to be more obsessed with the idea of them, right? Fair.
A lot just like kind of academically interesting about it. I mean, like when I was researching kind of childbirth, I was like, why does no one talk about these like really weird facts, like just strange things about, like how dangerous it is, and weird things that happen when you have a baby. And I never even knew about the kind of injuries you can have, and people breaking their pelvis and stuff. It's like, I mean, that's like something from Twilight.
And it's funny when someone is describing such things that can happen to you during pregnancy, they do sound like horror stories in the world of Blue Ticket. And it took me a moment to think, oh no, that's what women have to do.
That's just what happens, and like it's fine. It's like, it's meant to be just like what you do.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing not to think of it as the most profound thing that can happen to someone.
Mm. Yeah, that is
and also a mundane thing that lots of people do.
Yeah, it's I think that's like the pitfall of coming to it, I guess, from that kind of Sheila Heti perspective, that outsider perspective, where I have like no experience of it, where you know, I don't want to be mystifying it, and also I don't want to be attributing things like, oh, maybe, you know, I cannot be complete if I don't have a child, or, you know, I have to kind of, if I have a child, that's the only way I can, you know, get into another layer of love or something. And I know that it's a kind of a process of I guess mythologizing that parents and non-parents will make aside, and it's just, I guess there is no right or wrong answer, that people who are childless are capable of enormous love and of mothering. I've been like seeing some really interesting things about kind of mothering and parenting as a kind of bigger thing, not just to do with like children, but as a more kind of community-based and friend-based thing.
Yeah, and I
for an ideas.
in the pandemic, my first impulse when a friend of mine who's a mother complains about being overwhelmed is, I want to offer to babysit. And then I realized that that is not helpful at all. We are still in quarantine.
Yeah, it's been really interesting thinking about the divide between, you know, friends who have children and friends who don't, and having the luxury, I guess, of having had a child-free lockdown, and the luxury of kind of, oh yeah, I've watched some Netflix, I've got lots of work done.
Are you there?
We may have lost her briefly, but we'll give it a second.
Okay.
Is for the internet to go to space from London and then back down to all of us.
No,
There you are. Okay, great. Dropped out for just a second there if you can hear us, but it looks like you're back.
Yeah, wait, maybe not. Yeah, the world of Zoom book events, always, you never know what's going to happen.
I'm so sorry, I have no idea what happened. I think my internet just disappeared.
That's kind of what happened. So I think we should mention that you can still send in your questions for Sophie. So you know, keep thinking about them. It'll be time for her to answer questions very soon. And while I have you here, remember to buy a copy of the book, or 2 or 3, for all your friends who are probably struggling right now, either with motherhood during a pandemic, or feeling helplessly guilty about not being able to help parents who are struggling. Sophie, I feel like, sorry, my dog is scratching at the door. That's my cross to bear. I do feel like we're going to start looking at motherhood in a new way. I wonder if you've seen on Twitter the man who declared that it's a privilege to not have children.
Yes, I think I did see that, or I sort of saw some discourse around it.
It made me think of your book, is why.
Yeah, it's quite like what they're told them, it's like, yeah, like you don't have to do it, like actually it's wonderful, you kind of miss out on all this stuff. And yeah, and I guess it comes down again, that idea of choosing. Some people don't get to choose whether or not to have children. There's so many reasons that someone might not have a child, and so many of those are outside of your control. So, you know, it's not a privilege to not have something you really want, and something that's really important for you. And at the same time, I can still kind of see how the richness, if I never had a child, like I would be very sad, but the richness of my life would still be, hopefully, you know, very good. But yeah, I don't think it's an interesting thought, I guess, in the context of just this very stressful time when, like we said earlier, you know, like kind of the kind of boundaries of who does what and who is the one who looks after these children and it keeps the home going at this time is kind of being revealed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Should we take questions?
Yeah, we've got, I think, a couple really excellent questions to end on. And the first one is, or a few questions actually. Can you tell us what you most enjoy about the process after writing and editing the book? Do you enjoy festivals, events in the before times, and all of that?
Ooh, yeah, that's a nice question. Yeah, I kind of get very nervous at events, even Zoom events, but I do really love them. I kind of, yeah, I guess we were talking earlier about how it's strange doing a virtual event because you kind of don't get the energy transfer, and I really love that about doing face-to-face events and at bookstores and stuff. It's always really nice to meet people and to, you know, that feeling of like when you've just done a reading and it's totally fine, like you just read from your book and you answered some questions and like it was fine and you kind of can like relax. And yeah, it's those are the things I like. I think I'm quite like a social creature. So, and obviously writing a book is very much not very social. So doing the things where you get to like hang out with people and, you know, chat to people is good.
And there's a craft question here. And can you tell us a bit about how your writing practice changed or evolved between working on The Water Cure and Blue Ticket?
Yeah, so the main difference for me was I wrote The Water Cure when I was working full time, and I went freelance when I was working on Blue Ticket. So I had a bit more flexibility in terms of my writing time and my working time. But actually, I found I didn't write that much more. Part of it was because I actually did take on like quite a lot of work. But I think I figured out that I kind of work quite well under restriction, I guess. And if I have like a whole day, I'm like, oh, time to write. I'll just kind of, you know, oh, time to like arrange my pencils and time to make an elaborate breakfast and time to just like waste time accidentally, I guess. Whereas I know in writing The Water Cure, it was kind of like, okay, I have 1 hour. It's my lunch break and I need to get this done or it's not going to get done. So I'm just going to do it. So kind of trying to find that structure and routine has been really interesting. So yeah, The Water Cure and Blue Ticket kind of both took the same amount of time to write, which is almost exactly, which is quite interesting to me because I did have more time for Blue Ticket.
And then one last question, kind of my favorite question to end on, and I'll turn it to both of you, is more reading recommendations. So what have you been reading in lockdown or desert island books? Maybe I'll pose that to both Sophie and Meredith.
I'll go first, but you can end the whole thing, Sophie. I have been reading a lot during lockdown. Again, privilege of not having children, and also just like the absolute need for escapism above just about anything else. And I have read a lot of wonderful books. I'm pulling up my 2020 list right now. Let's see. Godshot by Chelsea Beaker is a great debut novel. We Ride Upon Sticks by Kwam Berry, which is a hockey novel set in the 80s that might involve witchcraft. So think of like all sorts of different tropes from your favorite 80s movies, and it's all in there, but edgier. And then the new Otessa Moshfegh is not really great for getting out of one's head, But it's kind of okay to get into somebody else's different messed up version of their lives, and I enjoy that very much.
I really want to read that, actually. That's like totally on my list. Yeah, I've had a weird relationship with reading in lockdown, where I've kind of, at first it was really difficult, and I needed like a book to get me into it. I think the book that got me back into reading, it was The Discomfort of Evening. I can't remember the author, but it's a book in translation. It was on the International Booker Prize shortlist, but it was really good. I mean, it's very dark, kind of in some elements, kind of. I just love like a dark family drama, kind of watercooey. But so I really enjoyed that, and that kind of got me out of my head a bit. And then I found myself going back to more like comfort reading, and I was meant to be on a residency in Paris, and I had a kind of lots of like Paris books kind of earmarked for when I was there, and I kind of read them instead. So I read Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which is amazing. I read quite a lot of Marguerite Duras, and then I had that thing recently where, you know, like when you read a book and it's so amazing and it kind of pushes every other book out of your brain. I just read Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, and yeah, I mean, it's so amazing. And I've kind of been, I mean, it doesn't even need my recommendation because, you know, everyone's reading it, but it's so good. And I read it over like 2 really sunny evenings recently in the UK, and it just kind of, it was so nice to read something that was so, I don't know, like just technically and in a way of craft is like incredibly beautiful and like stylish, and but also just incredibly like warm and gripping as a narrative too. Like I just loved it. So it's my recommendations.
And Sophie, I think that not enough people in America have read Girl, Woman, Other, so that's a good reminder for
definitely
us on this side.
And it's an opportunity for me to plug our book club this month, which is reading Girl, Woman, Other. So you still have a chance to join us in 2 weeks. We're going to discuss the whole novel. You can find information about that on our website. I'm going to sneak in one more question, Sophie, if that's okay, because it's I think it's a good one. Best writing tips. I am a GCSE student, and English is my worst subject, even though reading is my whole life. Can't wait for the UK release. So for a young student, best writing tips.
Best writing tips. I think like just do a little bit when you can. Like consistency is good, but don't kind of beat yourself up about it. If you can just write like even a few words or like a sentence a day, but it doesn't have to be, you know, when you can, basically just try and being consistent as you can, and don't think like you have to just, you know, write loads and loads and loads. I think like little and often is good, and to be kind to yourself as well, because I used to kind of always have these like big ideas, I'm gonna write a story, whatever, and then just like get so discouraged. And I think we need to be kinder generally as writers to ourselves, and to kind of not beat ourselves up if we you know, don't go as fast as we want, or it's not as good as we want, and just kind of be patient.
Thank you, and thank you both for joining us this evening. Thank you, Sophie, for waiting until the very wee hours to join us from London.
What is time?
That's true, but what
time? It doesn't exist. It's like
it's all
time.
it's all one time. We live in a simultaneous eternity, but hopefully not for long. So once again, if you'd like to buy Blue Ticket and you live in the States, you can do so on our website. Also, you can buy it if you're watching on YouTube in the description below. And also the books that Sophia Maris mentioned will be listed there as well if they're available from Literati Bookstore. Thank you both so much. Continue to please stay safe, and we hope to see you maybe in Ann Arbor when we return to somewhat normal life.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Maris.
Thank you. Congratulations, Sophie.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.